Hello and good morning and welcome to the Health Conference. How's everybody doing today? Good? Okay. My name is Parneet. I'm a physician and the Chief Science Officer at a company called Wisdom Labs. We're based in San Francisco, and we are solving for stress, burnout, anxiety, and loneliness in the workplace. And I'm delighted to be your host for this morning's session of the Health Conference today. And we have a stellar lineup for you this morning. We're going to be looking at what's the latest in health and technology, and we're going to dive deep into everything from mental health to genomics to AI to smart surgery. But first, I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about the future of health. And I want to do this looking at it through a few different aspects of our everyday lives, through the technology that we use, through our well-being, and through our work. And when you look at these three different areas of our lives, you'll find that we are in the middle of three global crises. We are in the middle of a global cognition crisis, we're in the middle of a global health crisis, and we're in the middle of a global business leadership crisis. And these are all interrelated. So what I'd like to do in the next few minutes is to offer a powerful and meaningful solution that can help us navigate these crises in a more skillful way. But first, let's take stock of where we are. So when we look at our technology, we are in the middle of what neuroscientist Adam Gazzaley at UCSF calls a global cognition crisis. And what he's really referring to is the fact that there's an arms race for our attention. And we're designing technology in such a way that we're being increasingly distracted. Our attention spans are getting smaller and smaller, and this means that we are getting more and more worse at the way that we make decisions, the way that we are empathic and compassionate towards others. And what this means is that we mistake the rush of dopamine that we have in our bodies when we get a social media notification and mistake that for long-lasting fulfillment and happiness. And we've all seen the fallout of this global cognition crisis, even now in our political health, in our emotional health, and in our social health. Next, when we look at our well-being, we find that we are in the middle of a global health crisis. So even now, 3 out of 4 of us in this room right now will suffer from a lifestyle-related chronic disease in our lifetimes. Even though 80 to 90% of these diseases are completely preventable when we pay attention to what we eat, how we move, how much we sleep, and how we manage our stress. And yet we're seeing these rising rates of chronic disease because we're at the mercy of our unconditioned reactive reflexes and habits. We seem to be losing our ability to make wise choices when it comes to our lifestyle. And when we look at our mental health, it's in shambles. Anxiety and depression rates are increasing. Burnout rates are across more than 40% across professions, and there's a global loneliness epidemic, which is slated to be the next big health epidemic of our times. Loneliness actually is as bad for our bodies as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and it's twice as bad for our health as obesity. And then finally, when we look at our work and our business, we find that we are in the middle of a crisis there as well. Most of us who go to work feel that we are completely disengaged, and we are all reporting this crisis of meaning and connection at work. And as leaders, as business leaders and founders and investors, we have a huge responsibility. Are we going to make choices in our business that will help grow regenerative economies, or are we only going to choose technology that favors the elite? So we are at a crucial inflection point in our history. And one of my favorite biologists, E.O. Wilson, has said that the problem with humanity is that we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. We are drowning in information, but starving for wisdom. At the 2018 World Economic Forum earlier this year, Yuval Harari, who's a well-known historian and thinker, was asked this question. He was asked that given that the future of work is so uncertain, what should we be focusing on? What should we and our children be focusing on? What are the industries or the skills that we should work at to ensure that we are socially and economically relevant in the next few decades? And I love his answer. He said that we don't need to protect jobs. We need to protect humans. And he said that it was impossible to predict what the world will look like in the next 20 to 30 years. The only thing that he was certain of was that it would look completely different from the way that it does today. And so he said that the most important skill that each one of us can learn right now is that of mental resilience and emotional intelligence, because this is what will help us navigate this uncertainty that lies ahead. And then he posed this question: how do you scale mental resilience and emotional intelligence? This is not something that you can learn by reading a book or just by attending a workshop. Meanwhile, Max Tegmark, who is an MIT cosmologist and leading thinker in AI, has said this. He has said that we can build a really inspiring future with technology if, and this is a big if, we win the wisdom race, which is a race between the growing power of our technology and our growing wisdom to manage it. And he points out that unlike older technologies like the invention of fire or the invention of cars, where there was a lot of room for trial and error, now in the age of synthetic biology and artificial general intelligence and nuclear power, we cannot afford to make mistakes. We need to get it right the first time. So the question then is, how do we scale this wisdom? Well, now it's time for the good news, and I'd love to share that powerful solution, the cognitive and biological solution that we all have access to. We are all born with this superpower, and that we can train in our lives to navigate these crises more skillfully. In fact, it's so integral to who we are that it's embedded in the name of our species. Homo sapien, wise human. And we were given this name because we are the only species that is capable of being self-aware and to be aware that we are aware. And this cognitive capacity of metacognition is also known as mindfulness. And mindfulness is nothing more than the ability to pay attention in this present moment and then use this information to respond skillfully, to respond with compassion for the benefit of not just yourself, but for everyone else around you. So I know what you're all thinking right now. That's all well and good, Parneet, but how is being mindful and compassionate going to help solve the global cognition and health and leadership crises? Well, let me explain. In the past 25 years or so, we've had amazing research being done on what happens in the brain and body when we practice consistently 5, 10, 15 minutes a day of mindfulness and compassion practices. And something fantastic happens. There are neuroplastic changes that take place in many different networks in the brain, specifically 3 of them. The first, it strengthens our attention networks. And what this means is that in the middle of chaos and distraction, you become the person who on demand can stay focused, can stay calm, and can also access your creativity. The other network that it strengthens is our emotional regulation networks. And this means that no matter what situation you find yourself in, you are better able to navigate difficult emotions like fear and anxiety and anger. And then the third network that it strengthens in the brain is our pro-sociality networks. And no, this does not mean the number of friends that you have on Facebook. What it's referring to is the fact that you develop the ability to turn the lens of focus outside and outward to the people around you. It helps to make you be kinder, more generous, more empathic, and more compassionate. You realize that it's impossible to be well yourself if the people around you are suffering. And I want to highlight this very quickly in the context of stress. So think of a situation in your life that is causing you stress right now. And as you think about it, know that what's happening in your body is that you mount the fight or flight stress response. So your heart rate goes up, your breathing goes up, your muscles tense up, and you get ready to fight or flee. And this is an appropriate response if you have a car coming at you to help save your life. But unfortunately, our brain can't tell the difference between an oncoming car and an angry email or what somebody says to us in a meeting. And so what ends up happening is that we walk around every day of our lives in this chronic state of fight or flight. And from the brain's perspective, the most important thing to remember is that in that state, our perspective literally narrows. We develop this tunnel vision, and we don't have access to the rest of the parts of our brain where our best ideas lie. And we also become really focused, and we forget about the people around us. And this places us in a position where we make really bad decisions for our technology, bad decisions for our health, and bad decisions for our businesses and our planet. And the power of mindfulness and compassion is that it stimulates the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system, which slows our heart rate down, it slows our breathing down, and it helps us come online, be present, and make good decisions. And so as we think about how we can scale this wisdom more widely, the workplace becomes the best area that we can scale these skills. And this is exactly what we're doing at Wisdom Labs. So at Wisdom Labs, we're using technology for good, and we realize that behavior change is really hard. And so we integrate our technologies during the workday through our app, through optimizing physical spaces, and through optimizing social communities. We build peer-to-peer practice programs so that people can build this community together. And so far, the results have been amazing. We've seen up to 18% improvements in levels of mindfulness, resilience, and compassion. And we've seen down-regulation of genes that code for inflammation and up-regulation of genes that code for immunity. And we've only just begun. So as we begin this morning session of Health Conference, I want to leave you with this thought. As founders, as entrepreneurs, as investors, as business leaders, we have an important choice to make. Are we going to react to the stresses and challenges of our lives with fight or flight and risk our health and the world becoming just another statistic? Or can we choose a different response? Can we upgrade our inner mind technology and scale this wisdom globally using our outer technology so that we are all more mindful and wise? The choice is up to us. Thank you for your attention. So it's my pleasure now to welcome our first panel. But before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that we will be using Slido throughout the morning session. So you can access Slido using your Web Summit app, where you can enter your questions, and then the moderators on various panels will be using your questions to ask the panelists as well. So we all know how useful smart technology is in our homes and offices, but what about smart technology in the surgical theater? Our next guests are right at the heart of the smart surgery revolution, whether they're pioneering ways to operate or using mixed reality to think outside the OR. Please welcome, in conversation with CNET's Katie Collins, transplant surgeon and professor at Johns Hopkins University, Dori Segev, and Chief Operating Officer of Afghan, Annie Rogaske.